Hello, we can stay. It's good.
Okay, great. Yeah. Hi, my name is Vishwas and I work at Mode as remote sensing specialist. And I am currently in India at my hometown. So there is some construction work going on in the next house. So I'm sitting outside the house under the trees. So please pardon if you hear a lot of birds. But I think it is also good to have some connect with the forests. So I will be going on with my talk. So I will switch off my video and good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to talk with all of you in this course, and I am sure that you have been having a really good training over past few days. So I am happy to talk about our work on resilient forest management. So actually, you might be aware that Mode works in the 8 regional member countries, starting from Afghanistan uh, up to Myanmar. This work that I'm going to present focuses on forest management practices in Nepal and how we try to add some scientific evidence, some new knowledge to the current management practices in Nepal. So, as you can see in the map, this is the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And in the region, as we talk about it, the altitude increases roughly from south to north. So also in case of Nepal, mostly the southern districts along the border with India are called Tarai districts, or they are called plains, basically, which have very low altitude and which have really good, productive soils. And also these are really like, some of them have really good forest patches, continuous patches, and also a few protected areas are located in the southern parts of Nepal. As we go along in the middles, a lot of activities on forest management and improving the forest resilience has been happening in middles since many years in Nepal. And in some cases, we also see some really good results where community forests have helped people to have a really good regeneration of forest, and the forest has really kind of rejuvenated. So those kind of examples are also there in case of middles. And as we go towards north, we see mostly it's high altitude area where there are a lot of mountain peaks, and mostly it is like above the tree line kind of ecosystems. But some of the high altitude districts also have some kind of like some level of forest, but after that it's mostly shrublands and alpine ecosystems. So this is all about Nepal for those who don't know much about it. So the like to talk simply about the issue that we try to address is basically according to the current assessment of land cover, uh, roughly approximately we can say that Nepal has more than 40% forest cover. In some of the reports, it is also said that it has 44%. Some of the reports say 43%. So we can very well say that it is about above 40%. But there is a really like large dependence of communities on these forest ecosystems, and that makes these forests even more important, because if anything happens to these forests, that is going to be likely affect the communities as well. And in general, in terms of the forest management practices, we see that there is like kind of lack of awareness on really integrating with the impacts of climate change. So mostly studying the impacts of climate change adaptation practices for forest ecosystems has been tried, but that has either been done at national level just for the assessment of national adaptation plan, or that has been done for some smaller pockets of forest in Nepal. But it has not really been tried at whole country level for whole of Nepal and really trying to institutionalize that practice. So this is the issue that we are trying to target in our work under Sarveer program. So I think Faisal might have talked about Sarveer and Menris program at Mode. So I will not repeat that. So basically our target is to bring some scientific evidence using remote sensing and GIS to enhance the current forest management practices and to address the forthcoming issue of climate change impacts and the degradation on these forest ecosystems. So I know there are a lot of participants from Nepal who might be aware about forest management hierarchies in Nepal, but this is also for others who don't know about it. Like there are different administrative approaches in Nepal. So since 2018, the federal ministry, or we can say Ministry of Forest and Environment, doesn't have that much of control on district level forest offices anymore. So it's mostly like, the federal ministry, and then we go to the provincial ministry. So there are 7 provinces in Nepal, and all the provinces have roughly 10 to 12 districts in each of them. And these provinces or provincial ministries have a mandate to manage the forests in their districts. So basically all these district forest offices report to the provincial ministry, and there is a forest directorate in each of the province that works with these DFOs to closely monitor the activities and to really see that if the work has been done. So that is how the current situation or current structure is divided into it. So we come from top federal to province to district, and also then there are the divisional and subdivisional level forest offices. So when we wanted to work on this activity, we reviewed a lot of literature, a lot of reports and plans. And then there is something called district level forest operational and working plan, WP, which is widely known as WP. So this is like the most important document when we are talking about divisional or district level forest. Basically, this document is revised every 5 years, and it talks about like what are the priority areas that district, that particular district or division needs to work on. What are those activities? What is the budget? And also like looking at back, what has been happening. And in some of these working plans, so we collected almost for more than 40 districts in Nepal. And we came to know that there is a chapter on climate change adaptation. But in most of them, there was not much significant data, or there was just one page that talked about importance of climate change adaptation, but not really any activities or any scientific analysis that came or that, gave an idea on, okay, what kind of climate change adaptation practices need to be done in that district. So we found that gap, and then we discussed with Department of Forest, and they also agreed to jointly work on this activity, where we are trying to understand that, okay, what are the climate change impacts, and then how we can really bring this resilient forest management practice in actual. So with these following objectives, we started the activity. We still call it a joint activity. So basically we want to know that, okay, how much is the forest climate change vulnerability and degradation due to anthropogenic drivers. So earlier when we just presented the concept to Forest Department about only climate change impact, then they said, okay, what about degradation? We are also interested in not only knowing about long-term impacts of climate change, but also short-term impacts due to degradation. So we also included the component on degradation, and to identify a set of adaptation and management strategies against the prioritized areas, whichever the areas may be, where we see that there is an urgent need to act on those areas, maybe because of high level of vulnerability or high level of degradation. So we also want to identify the set of management and adaptation strategies. And to develop a customized decision support tool, which currently we are calling a web-based decision support tool, which is hosted on ICIMOD's domain for supporting the forest management and adaptation. So this is a schematic just to explain that how it goes, how the activity goes about. Basically, we start from this level 1 with problem diagnosis, project design, and implementation. And during this, all of this, we regularly maintain a dialogue with Forest Department and also now these days with Provincial Ministry to really understand that, okay, whether our products are really, making sense, or there is too much of error, or maybe they are okay. Just to do the validation is also very important. And after we do that, there is a field evaluation, as I mentioned. And after doing that, then we take it to site implementation. So right now we are more or less currently at field evaluation stage. We have not got into really site implementation, but in coming years we will be going for that. So broadly, if you see that we are trying to address the issue of climate change impacts on forest vulnerability and social dependence. We are not going into social vulnerability because that is altogether a different topic of like livelihoods domain. And here we try to identify adaptation footprints, basically the areas which need attention. And we also want to identify at what scale they need an attention. Is it immediate? Is it, maybe in coming years? Or is it not needed? There is already a good management practice that is working here. And with that, with this diverse vulnerability and dependence systems or dynamics, we come to ecosystem level interventions and community level interventions. So in case of ecosystem level interventions, we work more on increasing resistance and improving resilience. And in community interventions, we work on enhancing ecosystem services and regulating the dependence. So this is a methodological framework to explain about data and what are the different components in this work. So there are two major components: climate sensitivity, that already includes forest fire, because also forest fire is one of the major disasters that happen in Nepal, and degradation, forest degradation. So if we see climate sensitivity, as the name indicates, it's mostly because of the non-human interventions, or like naturally occurring behaviors or patterns due to climate change. And forest degradation has a lot of role of anthropogenic drivers in it. So with these two products, then we come to forest vulnerability. And then by understanding the various levels of degradation and sensitivity, we identify the priorities. Basically for us, high degradation and high sensitivity, or later on we have divided this into 5 classes. Very high sensitivity and very high degradation needs very high priority. So basically these are the prioritized areas I was talking about. And some of you might have heard about UFRO's framework of forest level adaptation, which talks about more than 100 adaptation solutions for especially for forestry sector. We referred to that document apart from other documents, and we did like local level consultations, a little bit of discussion with district level stakeholders, and we have come to these 12 adaptation options that can be easily implemented in Nepal, considering the local situation. So when we talk about climate sensitivity, it is calculated using climate data and biophysical data. And most of the biophysical data comes from remote sensing data sets from Moody's satellite data. And climate data is basically observed trends and future predictions of climate data that is specifically developed for Nepal, for Nepal's national adaptation plan. So that was also available at EC mode, so we could easily use it. Based on that data sets, what basically we do is we look at the climate data of 2015 averaged. So that is for past 20 years of climate data. And then we look at also future prediction data under RCP 4.5 for 2050. And these are some of the climatic variables which I have listed here, which we have maintained after removing the autocorrelation between the data sets to avoid the duplication. And we look at net primary productivity, evapotranspiration, then also forest fire occurrence, land surface temperature, and albedo from Moody's datasets. and we analyze those Moody's products from say monthly, seasonal, annual, as well as decadal scale. And using data mining technique, we kind of try to see the correlation between the climate data sets and the data sets from Moody's at yearly scale or at say seasonal or decadal scale, and try to find out that where are those areas where the climate variables are playing a significant role in controlling this functioning of forests. So all these variables that fall under sensitivity, more or less they talk about the function of the forest, or they are kind of health indicators of forest. So we want to know which climate variable at what place is affecting which biophysical variable. And using that calculation, we develop the forest sensitivity, climate sensitivity map. Also, while talking about vulnerability, it is very important to consider adaptive capacity. So for adaptive capacity, we have some field data, and the field work will also begin after the lockdown and everything, the situation improves. So, but more or less, we had around 300 field plots to understand the structural and compositional status of these forest ecosystems. And using those data sets, we calculate species richness, tree density, biomass, as well as number of community forests in each district to understand that, okay, maybe that is kind of playing a positive role in all of this calculation. So based on that calculation, we have this combined map of climate sensitivity divided into 5 classes. So what does this map show? Basically, it shows that the green colored areas, which falls in a very low class, means that these are the forest areas in Nepal which have less impact of climate in general from observed climate data, like observed climatic trends. Whereas all those red colored areas or orange colored areas that fall in class 4 and 5 have very high impact of climate change in the past, and these forests are especially more sensitive to any change in the climate. So these are the areas which are going to get even worsely affected in the future climate data, future climate projections as well. So we can see that a lot of literature has talked about Himalayan ecosystems being vulnerable to climate change, or high altitude ecosystems especially have a lot of impact of climate change. But from our study, we see actual evidence that throughout the Nepal, the high altitude band of forest, this is forest area, not we are not talking about shrubland or alpine ecosystems. These are pure forest areas in the high altitude area of Nepal are actually sensitive to climate, and that has been proven with this kind of calculation. So here we see that okay, only about like the high altitude areas are sensitive. As we move along towards calculating the forest degradation, which comes from more of dependence component of with more anthropogenic impact on this. So there we look at 4 indicators basically. We look at the forest cover loss, we look at fuel wood extraction versus actual supply available. Then we also look at non-timber forest products because these are also very important in case of Nepal, their extraction versus supply, and also in case of fodder, how much is fodder available and how much is extracted. So using this, we create the surplus slash deficit maps, and combining that map, we see that, okay, also this is a 5 category map where low means there is surplus, more or less, combining all 4 products. And then high or very high means there is deficit. So we can see that more or less little above mid hills or more or less in the middles, we see that there is high degradation. I know that there have been a lot of efforts on improving the forest canopy in Nepal, in mid hills especially. So there could be some patches where this might not be 100% true, but overall trend wise, this is how it looks like. And when we come to the next part of forest fire risk, because forest fire is a prominent disaster in terms of forest ecosystems in Nepal. So using remote sensing data sets, we also try to calculate that where are those risk areas in Nepal which could be considered for more emphasis on forest management. And I can share the link for our paper later. But this all the details are available in our paper that we published in 2017. So basically, this table is quite important from understanding that we looked at all the forest fire locations in Nepal, and using data exploration, we found out that highest occurrence of forest fire is there in broad-leaved closed forest. This mostly occurs in the southern patches, southern areas of Nepal, southern districts. Also, the average summer land surface temperature goes above 30 degrees Celsius. Sorry, is there anything? Okay, yeah. So whenever the average summer land surface temperature goes above 30 degrees Celsius, we have very high occurrence of forest fires. We also looked at distance from settlement, distance from road, to understand how much is the human impact in this case of forest fires. We also looked at elevation and slope. And using this calculation, we have developed this. We have jointly developed this forest fire risk map for whole of Nepal in collaboration with Department of Forest. So last year there has been some changes in the map of Nepal. And we are trying to update the map also with last year's data. So very soon the new map will be ready. But more or less from this map, what we can see is all the areas with orange and red color, which is high and very high fire risk, are occurring in the southern parts of Nepal, mostly in the southern districts. More or less also a little bit of areas are falling also in the middles, but very prominent distribution is here in the Tarai districts or plains. And we have also listed high risk as well as very high risk districts in terms of the percentage area of high and very high falling in those districts. But when we talk about enhancing the forest management practices, it is important to also understand how the trends have been changing. So if you see the graph on the top right hand corner, this graph shows from 2003 to 2019 forest fire occurrence in Nepal with more than 50% confidence level of Moody's product. And in that, we have also tried to show month-wise distribution of forest fires. And you can see this orange band is for April. And since 2003, more or less, the occurrence of fire in a month of April has been very prominent. Also, March in some cases was there. But as we move along to 2015, which was an earthquake year in Nepal, we found out that the rain came early. Also, almost by mid of April, the rain was already there, and only 500 forest fires occurred in that year. But what that did was just to subside all the unburnt material as it is on the floor, because the rain was consistently there, which made even a bigger disaster next year. So as you can see the difference between 2015 and 2016. So in 2016, here already in March, the last year's number was exceeding. And this year there were around, as you can see the number, around 5,000 fires that occurred in the year of 2016. So when we talk about enhancing the forest management practices or, dealing really with these kind of disasters, we have to understand that last year less fire occurred does not mean that, there is a lot of improvement in terms of coping with these situations, but it could be also contributing inversely to the next year's fire. So it is also important that we keep in mind these kind of trends and prepare well. So when we explained this to forest department, they said that they had no idea about this kind of data and this kind of analysis. And this year and last year also similar kind of situation has happened. So we are also trying to analyze that. Like last year, due to lockdown and due to really imposed ban on traveling anywhere, there were very little fires that occurred in 2020. But as you can see, 2021, since February, March, already too many fires were occurring. So we are also trying to find out whether this really unburnt forest biomass plays a significant role, or is it more related to the mobility of people or anything else. So we are also trying to draft an article on that, and maybe very soon it will be out. So this is just to give an idea about the forest fire understanding. Now, in terms of enhancing the forest management, it is also important that, okay, we have this map of forest fire risk at one time. We can update it every year, but it is important to understand what is going to happen in near future. And for that, we are working on forest fire early risk prediction. We have just begun the work this year, so there is not much many results to show, but maybe, we can show, you can follow EC Mode's page and we can put the results there as they come along. So while talking about forest fire early risk, it is very important to understand the ignition source, the fuel load, recent climate history, moisture content, vegetation type, vegetation stage, topography, and other variables controlling contagion, and also whether there are any mechanisms for fire separations. And understanding all of this, we are currently working with forest department to develop a forest fire early risk prediction map that will consider different kind of data sets from ranging from vegetation to weather to slope aspect to topographic variables, as well as a few other indicators such as wind direction and the wind speed, etc., to understand that, okay, what is going to happen to the fire risk areas in the near future, means within a week's time or within next 15 days time. So there have been various models that have been developed to understand forest fire early risk or kind of risk. Some of them are biophysical models which use vegetation type, fuel load, climate data sets to predict the fire. In this case, a lot of remote sensing data sets have been widely used to understand the influence on biophysical variables. There are certain statistical models. For example, the one that we had used is a statistical model to understand the forest fire risk using a combination of different variables. And there are fire behavioral models, which we are trying to integrate with to understand the impact of wind, topography, and fuel as we move along in the landscape. So using those variables and like to understand especially the vegetation condition. So when we talk about vegetation condition, we basically try to understand how much is the dryness in the vegetation. So some of you might be already aware about these indices, like, widely used vegetation indices, NDVI, EVI, also SAVI. These indices can play a significant role in understanding the trend of dryness of vegetation. So most of you might be using it to understand, okay, how much is the greenness in the vegetation, but inversely, we can also use these indicators or indices to understand the dry areas where the vegetation is pretty dry and the fuel load is becoming very high. So using these kind of indices, we can calculate the vegetation type or vegetation condition for forest fire early risk. As I was talking about weather, so the fire weather, basically we know that hot and dry weather conditions resulting from high temperatures play a significant role in causing the fire, or at least supporting the fire occurrence. So based on the short-term weather data that comes from high watt data sets, we want to understand that how much will be the dryness in the weather itself in the coming week or coming 10 days. We also want to understand that we also want to understand that how much is the humidity in terms of, is there any rainfall prediction in coming weeks or coming days, and how that is going to affect the dryness of vegetation, which can reduce the occurrence of fire. Also, to understand the wind direction and wind speed is really important. So that could also be considered in this calculation. So currently at EC mode, we are developing something called HiWatt, which provides some of these weather indicators at short-term scale, like for at weekly scale or at 10 days duration scale, or also at 3 days duration scale. So we are trying to use those data sets to understand the short-term weather and to predict the fire occurrence. Also, as I was talking about it, topography is very important. Most of you might have heard about this already, that slopes in the northern hemisphere, the slopes that face southern direction or southern aspect get maximum sunlight, and hence these ecosystems or these forests are more likely to have more drier vegetation that can burn very rapidly and can support the fire occurrence. And also the fires can easily or very easily burn along the steep slopes, also because they get a lot of support due to the upward going wind, and also the dry vegetation, continuous dry vegetation occurring there. So these kind of things also play an important role. So these are also being considered in the forest fire early risk prediction. That was about the prediction part. But it is also important to understand that how these forest fires have caused damage and how much of damage it has caused to these ecosystems. So if you look at forest burnt area products currently available in open access, there are certain products that give you the forest fire burnt area only after 4 to 6 months of actual forest fire occurrence. And when we discussed with forest department, they mentioned the need for doing the rapid assessment of this kind of forest burnt area to get a quantified data on how much of forest has actually been burned because of forest fires. So we are trying also, this is a joint activity with forest department, where we are trying to use satellite data sets from Sentinel-2 and also from Landsat 8, and to use this combination of NIR and SWIR band to understand that where are those burnt areas. So when we look at the spectral response of comparing with healthy vegetation to burnt vegetation, we can see that there is a lot of reflectance, high reflectance in SWIR band. So that's why SWIR has come in picture. So basically, healthy vegetation versus burnt vegetation goes inversely, which helps us to identify the burnt areas very easily. So this also we are trying to do for this year, for 2021, using the pre-fire data for last year, for July to September, where we are 100% sure that there have not been any fires occurring during that time because that is monsoon season. And also to look at post-fire months. Basically, these are actual fire months when the fires are occurring from February to April. And this is the method that we use to calculate the burnt area or normalized burn ratio. So basically that is the difference, reference normalized burn ratio, which looks something like this, which is also divided into 5 classes. So class 1, or here if you see the green colored class, is about regrowth or unburnt areas. Then we come to class 2, which is low severity. Class 3 is moderate to low severity, and especially class 4 and 5, which are moderate to high severity and high severity. In this map, they are not very clearly visible, so I have zoomed in a few places. So we only considered those areas and looked at a few places, especially in Tarai districts in Nepal, to understand that whether our product is giving a acceptable patch size of forest burnt area. Because based on this normalized burn ratio, we get certain threshold values, and based on these threshold values, you can call it either you can use natural bricks classification to classify it into 5 classes and understand whether there is, how much is the distribution in high and very high severity class. So to understand that, we really need to understand that how much is the patch size that we are expecting or that we are anticipating. And currently, we are doing some sort of validation for these forest burnt areas in different parts of Nepal. For example, here if you see, these small patches are okay, but we say that these big patches, maybe need some kind of refinement. So we are working on these districts to understand what could be a feasible or what could be an acceptable forest burn patch size, and then we, kind of finalize the product of forest burnt area. So talking about forest fire, now we move on towards the final combination of all of this into climate change vulnerability of forest ecosystems. So when we have this product of climate change vulnerability, I will go a few slides further and then come back again. You might remember that this climate sensitivity is seen very high in high areas, only in high altitude parts of Nepal. The forest degradation, we know that mostly high and very high forest degradation has been seen in middle or middles parts of Nepal, and forest fire occurrence or forest fire risk has been seen in the southern parts or Tarai parts of Nepal. So it is very important to understand, like this is where the GIS plays an important role in understanding the geographic trends of these different indicators or these different mechanisms, and really, try to understand that, okay, where are those places? Maybe, the climate sensitivity is very high in high altitude areas, but the forest fires are occurring mostly along the southern parts of Nepal, which means that although the climate sensitivity is high in the high altitude areas, there is a lot of anthropogenic factors that are playing role in the southern parts of Nepal that is making it more and more prone to the forest fires. So these kind of diverse trends needs to be understood, and then really combine all of these together in order to have this final vulnerability map. So this is the final climate change vulnerability map, which again we have classified using natural bricks classification in GIS. And we say that, okay, whatever areas you see in class 4 and 5 kind of need immediate to near immediate attention in terms of adaptation practices. So we don't restrict ourselves only by calculating the vulnerability and, just restricting to it, publishing a paper or something, but we really want to take it to the next level and understand what are those adaptation measures that are suitable for these high and very high vulnerable areas of forest in different parts of Nepal. So here we talk about high priority areas, which is nothing but the high and very high areas that we saw in the earlier map. We use geospatial analysis and identification of adaptation options using different sets of data sets, like, geophysical drivers, biophysical drivers, then socioeconomic data sets are also important. And it is also important to understand governance and political drivers. And using all of these data sets, we, as I had mentioned in the earlier slide, we talk about ecosystem interventions and we talk about community level interventions. And in that, we have divided 3 adaptation options in each of the subsection, like enhancing the resistance. Then we are working more on fire regulation, grazing regulation, and invasion control. Improving the resilience, there we are working on assisting transitions, habitat connectivity, and reducing non-climatic pressure. In terms of enhancing ecosystem provisions, we are focusing more on increasing forest cover, improving stock level, and enhancing productivity with different silvicultural options. And in order to regulate dependence, we are working on agroforestry, understanding the potential and capitalizing on that potential of agroforestry in different parts, solar energy, and alleviating economic and social systems. So we took our results to, to our real stakeholders like forest department, and also in a few districts, we are currently doing the validation exercise for these results and trying to understand how much is the precision of our products in terms of actual reality on the ground. And based on that results, after the validation process is over, these products are being integrated in this best decision support tool that I am going to show it to you a little bit. So just let me share my screen, and can you please confirm if you can see the screen? Hello, are you able
Hello.
to see the screen?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, Vishwa sir.
Yes.
Okay,
thank
great.
You.
Yeah.
Thank,
Okay, great.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thank you. So I will just give a short demo of this web-based ecosystem, like web decision support system. So when we this is the first outlook of the of the decision support system.
Vishwaji, it is still showing this your PDF screen.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. Thank you for informing. Okay, so let me share. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Is there any questions from our Chinese about our topic on resilient forest management? Okay.
It is visible now,
Getting-
Vishwaji.
You can see the system? Okay, great.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we can see it. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So this is the web-based decision support system that we are developing with Forest Department. And basically this system talks about all those products that I showed in the presentation, as well as apart from that there are a few other products which can support a decision maker as well as a researcher who wants to know about these diverse trends. So for example, let us go to province 1, and in province 1 we can we can select some districts, say maybe Pachthar. And so when we are at country level, we can see province level trends of different products. Right now, the product that we are seeing is current climate sensitivity. If I change the product maybe to say future climate sensitivity, so we can see how province wise the trends are differing in different classes. At the same time, when you go to province, you will be able to see the data for all the districts in that province. So this is how we have kind of combination of maps and combination of graphs. So when we talk about climate sensitivity, for example, the thing that I was talking about, and we were at say Pachthar. So currently we know that, okay, more of Pachtar's ecosystem is okay. Currently more or less it is in low category of climate sensitivity and not much of issue. But at the same time, when you go to future climate sensitivity, you can see the graphs are moving towards high and very high class, showing that in future, these forests in Pachtar might have